There we go. It's a nice picture of you as well.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
Fine. How about you?
Yeah, good. A little bit hot. I'm also sitting I put a lamp right next to me to try and make it a bit brighter, but good.
Right, let's just do that.
You had a busy day?
I have, yes. I've had a busy week, but I've been out a couple of times. It's quite a novelty, this socialising. I'm out of practice.
I know. I find that after about, I don't know, a few hours, I'm done. I'm tired. And also, I don't know about you, but I can't handle my drink anymore. Literally, I had 2 glasses of wine and I was like, that's it. So
yes,
it's it's nice. Oh, this is funny. Emma is on my account and she's showing up with me. Emma, she's
on mute as well.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. You switched it.
Hey, it's weird, Emma, you're still basically in my account, I think. Okay. Right, we'll wait a minute and then let people in. We had...
How many registrations have you got?
We had 15 registered, which is not as many as we wanted, but still decent. So I'm interested to see how many of those come. But we've got 3 in the waiting room at the moment. We'll wait. I think I'll wait until 8 and see what happens.
Well, we can be quite open with questions then if it's a small number and they're willing to speak up, although, sometimes people don't particularly want to talk, do they, necessarily? But
yeah, I'm going to say to everyone that they can either message me if they want to have a question, or we can field them as we go. I think if they put them in the chat, and then if they're relevant, I can say, I'd like to invite so-and-so to talk. Great. Gonna let people in. Maybe we'll wait a minute or 2. Hi. Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute or so and then we will start. Welcome to tonight's session. I'm going to mute everyone, but if as we go, feel free to mute yourself. Hi, Frank. Hi, Mimi, Nikita, welcome.
hello, everyone.
We'll just wait 1 more minute and then we'll start. Hi there. Let's begin, and then if anyone joins us later, that's absolutely fine. It's nicer for a small group because it means we can ask Liz questions, which will be wonderful. Welcome, everyone. I'm Emily, and we're all here sadly because we've lost someone, and we're in a club we didn't want to be in. So know how overwhelming it can be when you're grieving and you're also having to think about paperwork and money and bills. And that's why we set up this event. I'm CEO of Untangle. So Untangle helps families to rebuild life after loss. We provide practical, emotional, and social support in one place. And this event is a part of a series we're doing on grief and wellness. So we really hope that, as you're handling all the bills and paperwork, that this event can support you. Oh, we've got people joining at the moment. Maybe I'll wait a second. Please, could everyone keep themselves on mute just as a housekeeping? And if you have any questions for Liz, pop them in the chat. Or maybe I'll wait a second. I've got people coming into the group. 1 minute. We might restart in a second. Take 2. All right, I'm going to carry on, and we can. I'm going to carry on. So, hi everyone. Yep, welcome. So I was just saying that this event is brought to you by Untangle, and we help families rebuild life after loss. Please keep yourselves on mute, and if you have any questions, then pop them in the chat, and if you feel comfortable, I'll pull you in and say, would you like to ask your question? If not, we'll wait a couple of minutes, and I'll field them to Liz. And that's just to make sure we don't break the flow, but we also want to keep this kind of as a conversation as best as we can. So if they're relevant and, there's a natural pause, then definitely I'll pull you in and say, please ask Liz directly. And I'm going to be recording tonight's session just to let everyone know. So I hope that that's okay. We're not going to do anything crazy with the video, but we like to keep a record of it. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Liz. So Liz is a qualified personal budget and coach and debt advisor. She's worked as a volunteer for over 10 years, and she helps people manage their money, manage their benefits, and understand debt management options. She's also an independent advocate. So she takes action to help people with mental health, disabilities, and dementia to say what they want and secure their rights. And in her professional, aside from all of that, in her professional, she has worked for IBM for over 30 years as a trusted business advisor across management, sales, and technical roles in the UK, Europe, and Middle East. So we are really delighted that Liz is here. And I want to hand over to Liz and start by asking, can you tell us a bit more about why this work is important to you, Liz?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Emily. And hello to everyone. Good evening. This work is important to me. About 10 years ago, when I first heard about budget coaching, it struck a chord with me because I'd been through some changes in my own life, and I'd had to come to terms with managing money, in different situations, relationship breakdown, bereavement, all of these things. And I began the volunteering then. And as time went by, I was dealing with people who'd had a significant change in their situation due to bereavement quite often. I had bereavements in my own family as well, and I found I could use some of this budgeting information to help people go through the bereavement thing. And I also found my own experience of it as well helped me to support other people at that time. And that's really how it all came about. So I was very interested when I heard what Emily was doing last year. And, I just thought this was such a great idea. I was very happy to be involved.
Thanks, Liz. And we're very happy that you're here today. So let's start with kind of the introduction. What are your top tips for thinking about money and bills and budgeting after a bereavement?
Well, it's always a difficult time because there is so much going on, and trying to think about what to do first and how to manage things. I know I found it a challenge. So my top tips really are, first of all, to look after yourself and not expect to do too much too quickly. Stay organized, keep a list of things if that helps you, and figure out a plan of action. Not everything needs to be done straight away. People will offer to help you, take offers of help. I think a lot of people find it hard to approach you if you've been bereaved. They don't know what help you need. So you need to be a little bit more, say what you want and what you think can help if you know what it is. I would say just be a little bit wary for people that are a little bit over friendly or too helpful. Sometimes your inner self will tell you that, you know, there's something not quite right here. You know, there are some people around who might try and take advantage. So just be on the lookout for that. But apart from that, I think once you've accepted that your own emotions are going to be up and down, and some days you'll feel like doing more things than others, you can start to get organised and handle the more immediate things like the budgeting and the household bills and so on. So that would be my advice for how to get started, if you like.
Thanks. And are there things that you should be focusing on straight away, so straight after bereavement?
Well, I think there's inevitably things that you will find, depending on who you're supporting or whether you're the direct person involved or, you know, whatever the situation, there will be some things that you may have to deal with straight away, like organising a funeral or informing people of what has happened. With my own mother, I sat down next to her and we rang round the utility companies to tell them to change the bills and that sort of thing. That was a simple, practical thing to do straight away. I couldn't do it on my own without her there, but she could give me permission to do that. So we got a few of simple things sorted out. And I think it's good to sort of, you know, to try and do some of those things. But every situation is going to be slightly different. But I think you'll generally know what's more pressing at the time.
Yeah, one of the things that really surprised me is that actually you don't need to tell the banks like straight away. I think people think that that's like the first thing you need to do, and you actually don't. Not to say that you shouldn't tell the banks, but it's not the most pressing thing. And how do you know who, you said the kind of who should be doing this?
Well, it all depends on what the setup is. If there is a will and an executor will probably, and there may be more than one executor, so you may have to agree amongst yourselves how you do it, who's going to do what. So it's good to be organised and split up the jobs, maybe share them out if there's more than, you know, a number of people involved. I would suggest that. If there is no will, then it's generally coming down to those that are closest to the people affected. So it might be as formal as a next of kin, or, you know, a family relation or something, or it may be a good friend that is trustworthy and willing to help. So, you know, each to their own, whatever works in that situation. But it is really good to get some help and a sense of perspective. I think that makes a big difference. So if you're in the situation of supporting someone else who's been through it, it makes a big difference to them. It's really helpful to have someone to help you.
And is there anything that you'd suggest people kind of take their time over versus doing quite quickly?
Well, I would say the day-to-day things probably can be dealt with relatively. The day-to-day administrative things are relatively simple. The bigger things may be like moving house or moving job or taking up a job. Maybe you need to work again after a while because of the changes. The big decisions like that, I would say, wait a bit longer before you make those. I was advised not to take any big decisions for at least 6 months. And I think that was probably good advice, because it's very hard to think clearly and to know what you really want and what your options are. So it's good to take your time over those bigger decisions, I would say. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And actually, one of the interesting things, going back to your previous point, that in the UK, there's not like a legal appointment of who your next of kin is. So it's basically a close relative, and it can be a spouse or a child or parent or sibling. So I think that's quite interesting that quite a few people can help you through the process as well. So moving on to benefits, could you explain what benefits are?
Yes, so benefits are payments by the government to support people in different situations where they may need some extra help, or they may have saved money towards a pension, for example. So there's lots of different categories of benefits. I think one of the things to note about benefits, particularly, I mean, this was the case in terms of my father. So when my father died, some of his pension had been paid in advance. So it was important to tell the DWP, the pension provider, quite quickly what had happened, so that we didn't have too much to pay back. Because this is what will happen if benefits of varying types are being paid in advance, you will have to pay back that overpayment. So it's better to do those in quite a timely way, I think. And in a lot of situations, the actual pension payment from a private pension as well as a state pension may also need to be recalculated, and it's better to get that sorted out fairly quickly, I would suggest. There's also benefits that may be being paid to the deceased, like attendance allowance and stuff like that, which you'd really want to stop so that you don't have a big lump sum to pay back for that as well. There are some specific bereavement benefits as well. You know, a lump sum that can be paid to support people with the funeral and that kind of thing. So again, I wouldn't hold off very long claiming those either.
Yeah, there's a funeral expenses payment, so you can reclaim the cost of burial fees and cremation fees and up to £1,000 towards funeral expenses. So if anyone's planning a funeral, then look into those. Are there any other benefits that you think people should know about or that they're entitled to often after a bereavement?
Well, if your income has dropped substantially, which is often the case for many people, it may be possible that you can claim some benefits from the government for that. And there is a site called Turn to Us that will allow you to put in details of your situation, and it will give you an indication of any benefits you might be able to claim and a rough idea of the value. It's not super accurate, but it's a very good guide, and it will give you an idea as to whether it's worth trying to claim some additional support, for example, on the basis of a reduced income.
That's really helpful to know about that. And my next question was, how can people work out what they're entitled to? But it sounds like Turn to Us is the solution to that. Are there any benefits that stop when someone dies?
Yes, there may be the bereaved may have been receiving some benefits which will then stop. And there may have been some sort of income support to the household as a whole that will stop or need to be recalculated. So again, you know, I would say tackle these fairly early on so that you don't build up a repayment or maybe get too far into debt waiting for these payments. So they would normally be relatively quick to recalculate those, and I think that would be yes, you don't want to be too far out of the dates and building up big sort of arrears that either you owe or that you have to pay back, because then that can make it very hard to manage on a budget.
Mm-hmm. And just for kind of really simplifying it, to actually find out about the benefits and do you go to the government website?
Yes, Turn to Us will have some links in it, and there are other websites. Moneysavingexpert.com is a website I recommend a lot to my clients. They have a section called What to Do When Someone Dies, and this goes through lots and lots of different sections. It's quite an alarmingly long list, but not all of them apply to everybody. But it does give you some useful links and information and benefits is included in that, along with a whole load of things that probably I wouldn't even think of, and certainly most people wouldn't think of in that situation.
Thanks. Has anyone got any questions around benefits before we move on to talking about debts? No, I'm gonna move on. Can you explain what debts are, please?
Well, debts are when you owe money to somebody else, and most of us have some debts. Some debts are better than others. Many of us borrow money to buy a house, for example, so a mortgage is a debt. Other examples of debts might be loans, credit cards, owing money on your utility bill, for example, owing money on your benefits is another example. So there's a whole category of debts. And some are perfectly fine and part of everyday life and we accept them, and others are can be more problematic for people, particularly if your circumstances change.
I remember you describing debts as good debts and bad debts. So, paying your utility bills on a direct debit is a good debt, but owing the bank lots of money or the government lots of money, in my position, is a bad debt. And actually knowing the distinction between the two is quite useful when thinking about managing your money. And What are priority debts and non-priority debts to pay after someone dies?
Yes, when you get into debt advice more generally, not just when someone dies, but if you find yourself in a situation where you can't manage the payment of debts, they will be prioritized into priority and non-priority. Priority debts are debts where something bad happens if you don't pay them. So that includes being sent to jail. It may be losing the roof over your head. It's all these kind of things, maybe having your power cut off. And if you don't pay certain debts, then there are unpleasant consequences. And that's what we mean by priority debts. There are other debts, non-priority debts, where effectively they can't really do very much to disrupt your life. They can't send you to jail. They can phone you, they can hassle you, they can send you lots of letters and that kind of thing, but they can't really take anything away from you. So they need to be tackled, but you would prioritize on the basis of what had the most impact. Yes.
So for someone who's just had a bereavement and is thinking about, potentially you've lost an income stream or you're having to manage lots of bills, would you suggest ranking the debts basically, and who's going to come after you if you don't pay them?
Yes, I think you really need to prioritize all the things that you're doing, because there is so much to do. And I think those immediately difficult ones, most banks, most credit card companies, mortgage companies, and utility companies will have a bereavement department. And if you're having trouble paying the bills, you can contact them and explain what's happened, and they will normally be fairly understanding and maybe help you set up a payment plan, which you would probably do after you'd set up a budget so that you knew how much you could afford to pay back, and then maybe pay it back over an extended period of time. So their bereavement departments are generally fairly understanding. They're not going to write off all the debt. You are going to have to repay it. It's not a complete carte blanche, but they will be supportive. They will be helpful. And if you've consulted a budget coach or gone to something like the CAB or one of the other charities, to have a professionally drawn up budget will mean they will listen to you. They will know you've worked out how much you can afford to repay. So they will generally respect a sensible offer in that context.
And I actually had this recently. I didn't do my tax return correctly for a while and ended up in a lot of debt, and made a little spreadsheet with the things, essentially my outgoings, so the things I was spending money on, and if there was any flexibility, which there wasn't a lot, and took that to HMRC, and they agreed a repayment plan based on how much money kind of I was earning and how much money things like rent and bills came to. So I have firsthand experience of this, and I actually feel a lot less stressed having sorted that out. So for anyone who's burying their head in the sand about these things, I can tell you it's not as bad ripping the plaster off as you think it will be. And I speak from experience. I'm just building on this. How can someone actually find their debts? And in this instance, we're really talking about, your loved ones' debts that they may have left as well.
Well, it all depends what kind of situation you are taking over. In some cases, it's not unusual for a couple where one half of the couple maybe handles all the household bills and the other doesn't. And then if they're left on their own, they suddenly have to pick up all these things. That's not an unusual situation. More and more bills now are online, of course, so there's less paperwork, less of a paper trail to follow. And so it can be a little bit difficult to track down some of these things. What we generally do if someone comes for debt advice and can't remember where all the debts are, and this may happen if you've got some older debts, say from credit cards or from a mobile phone bill, and you haven't dealt with it and it's kind of gone quiet for a few years, it's easy to forget what they all are and how much they were. We can do a credit search, and there are a couple of organizations you can go to for that, and it will generally report on any credit agreements that you have and the status of them. So we would generally look back at that and pick up the debts that way. it's quite complex. It's quite difficult because sometimes debts are sold on to other companies. So one debt might have several entries on this credit search report. But you can normally, with a bit of detective work, figure out what's going on and sort it out, and then contact the creditor and start negotiations with how you're going to handle it.
I remember you saying that, is it Experian? You can do a search and look for credit through Experian?
Yes, Experian is probably the best known one, but there's several others as well. And what we've found over the years with debt advice and budgeting is that not all of the financial organisations report to all of the credit search companies. So that's why we sometimes do several, and different ones show up on the different reports. And you know, there's various reasons for that, but that's just something we've learned to deal with over the years.
Is it naughty the financial organizations are trying to keep you in debt and paying interest on that? Probably, I didn't say that, but so basically
no, but I think I think I have a view that actually, from a bank's perspective, it's not a bad thing if you're sitting there with a loan and paying interest on it, or an overdraft. You know, that's quite profitable for them. So they don't necessarily have an interest in helping you to reduce it. But if you can reduce it and save all those interest payments, then, you know, that's money in your pocket rather than theirs, which has got to be a good thing in my book. So that's how I look at it.
So you'd recommend doing a debt search, maybe someone like Experian or another organization, and actually try and locate, you know, if your loved one had lots of credit cards or subscriptions, and potentially you can find those debts and pay them off, or call the companies, speak to the companies and try and negotiate some kind of repayment plan or write-off.
Yes. And the other thing to do is maybe to go back in the bank statements and have a look at what's coming in and going out. And the easy things to spot are normally the monthly bills, the utility bill, the mobile bill, those kind of things. But remember, sometimes there's some bills that are quarterly or half yearly, you know, subscription, an annual subscription. So don't forget to go back maybe 12 months or more in the bank statements and credit card statements, because subscriptions sometimes are set up with credit cards. Magazine subscriptions, for example, can often be just a recurring subscription on a credit card that pops up once a year. So you've got to be quite diligent to pick that up. That's not necessarily going to show up on a debt report, because it may not be a debt, but obviously that's a subscription you want to cancel. So, you know, that's where you might pick up that information as well. So it's important to be quite well organised. You may have to send debt certificates off to some of these organisations, and then they'll tend to send them back. So you can kind of tick them off on your list as you get the acknowledgement from them, and generally sort of being well organised. Depends how complex the financial affairs of the person are, but you know, if they're reasonably complex and they've got a couple of credit cards and a whole host of subscriptions, it can be a little bit of administrative work just to close those all down cleanly and get them sorted out. But it's definitely worth doing to stop the phone calls or the letters or whatever, because they will chase up the debt eventually.
I was going to ask a question on that. If you just ignore the debt, does it, you know, or if you don't know about it, can you just not pay it? Does it go away?
There is a period of time after which is, I think, is about 6 years if you haven't been in communication with them, where technically you possibly don't have to pay it. There's a bit of a sort of legal thing there. I wouldn't generally recommend it as a strategy for dealing with debts. It's generally better to face up to them. And if you go to someone like the CAB or to our own community money advice service, and there's others around the country as well, they will generally take you through a debt process where they will make sure you get the advice about what your options are. And it may be some of the debts may be written off. You might do a mini bankruptcy, or you might repay some of them. You know, they will help you understand all the different options. And I think you really should go to a specialist. You know, it's not something to attempt on your own, really. But they'll be very supportive and ready to help.
And I'll put some links in at the end for people to find these services. A question from Emma here. If you find out that you've been paying a subscription for a loved one who's passed away, will the companies honour it and give you a refund?
Some do, some don't. Depends on whether you can appeal to their better nature. Some of them don't have a better nature. But I've tried to recoup things like subscriptions, sometimes sold to people and totally unsuitable. And some companies will relent and repay, and others just don't want to know. So it's worth a try. It is always worth asking.
The big one that's come up a lot in our community is phone bills. Just people, they're like, you've got a 12-month contract and you've got to honour it, which is obviously really difficult. I mean, the only silver lining from that is you can keep that person's voicemail going for another 6 months, which is obviously quite nice to hear their voice sometimes. But it's a difficult one. Have you got any debt horror stories for us? I know that you've worked in this industry for a long time, maybe to make some of us feel slightly better about what's going on.
Let me think. I personally, I feel quite cross when I feel big companies have taken advantage of individuals. That's one of the reasons why I do this, and I do come across quite vulnerable people being sold inappropriate financial products, either in the form of overdrafts or loans that they don't need. I've come across that, where the banks have pushed them into packaged bank accounts with benefits that they really don't need. Debts, most people feel terrible when they come to see us. They've usually reached some sort of crisis point and it's all got too much, and there's carrier bag full of letters. Some of them haven't even been opened, but it's reached some sort of crisis point. And I think just going and talking to someone about it sometimes makes you feel better. And knowing that someone says, there is a way through this. It's only money, they're not going to take your life away. This is something that can be handled, that can be dealt with. But, there are some steps we need to go through, and, we'll be there with you to help you. So, there is always light at the end of the tunnel in that respect. Things can always be handled. And if you haven't got the money, they can't take the money from you. So it's a case of coming to an arrangement, or coming to an agreement, or becoming bankrupt and writing it off. That, there is nearly always a solution, but it's a few steps to get there.
Yeah. And especially when someone dies, and then, it's already an incredibly stressful and overwhelming time when you're grieving, to then having to think about money and managing money, often when your circumstances have changed a lot. And often, people, you divvy up things in a household, or so you're having to suddenly manage potentially something your partner managed, or if it's your parent, who's passed away, suddenly you've got all your own bills to manage and sorting out all of theirs as well, which can be really, really overwhelming and difficult. Do what is it, would you say, that when someone dies has the biggest impact on your finances?
Wow. Well, what is the biggest impact? I guess it's got to be the impact on income, and not knowing, having to adjust to a different income and a different way of living, which for some people means they need to go back to work, or they may need to downsize, or they may decide they want to go and live somewhere else. There's all kinds of sort of, impacts that follow on from that, I think. So I would say, yes, the sudden change in income is a big shock to a lot of people. It's one more thing to deal with that's hard.
Mm-hmm. And there's also, as you said, with the house, if it's a parent who's died, actually, if you were living with them or caring with them, selling a house might be a very stressful thing to do as well. So there's lots of, even if you've kind of come into some money, there's still complication and stress involved on the other side of the spectrum. And have you seen any really common situations with people who've had a bereavement? Things, kind of red flags to look out for, I guess?
let me think. I suppose with most money management and debt advice, I think it's probably ignoring things and not tackling things, not being able to, not knowing how to handle things, probably. So I would say that the warning sign is somebody not dealing with stuff, kind of, not opening the letters, not engaging with the bank, not trying to sort things out. I think that would probably be my biggest worry. Yeah, I think so. I can't really think what else to say. I think there are always challenges and always things that are a little bit difficult. And as I said, most organisations will be understanding if you get through to the bereavement department, but some of the organisations still mess things up and don't close accounts when they should. They don't transfer money as they should. So you have to track it and make sure it happens. I've had a couple of personal experiences of that where I thought everything was closed, and then 6 months later I find it isn't, and it's kind of, well, why didn't that happen? So yes, it's all of those things.
And there's a question here from Nikita. How can you be reimbursed for the legal fees incurred for the will, probate, and letters of administration?
Well, I'm going to assume that is someone acting as an executor, is it? Is that what we're talking about here?
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yes. I mean, I've been an executor a few times, and you can charge basically for reasonable expenses as part of being an executor. So if you're sending, I had to send some documents registered post, for example, to the solicitor, so I claimed the cost of doing that. You don't claim for your own time, but I think I applied for probate and there's a charge for that, so I claimed the cost of that as well. So there were a few things like that. Is that what you were wondering about?
Yes, because the fees are very substantial, and I asked the lawyer, well, how can I be reimbursed for this? And up to now, I have been unable to get a definite answer. I was advised about claiming for the funeral expenses, so that part has sorted out, but there's still a big question mark about the legal fees.
Well, for general administrative expenses for handling the will, yeah, I would claim that out of the estate. I'm not sure whether you're suggesting there are other legal expenses associated with this. I don't know what the position would be for that.
No, the ones that you're speaking about are the fees that I am dealing with, because I had to pay the lawyer so that they can apply for the probate, because they couldn't apply for it directly. So this is my mom's lawyer. She's the one that passed. So, and I'm the executor or whatever of the will. So I've been in contact with them and paying the fees out of my own funds. So I just was wondering how that goes.
I would think that should be covered. That sounds like a direct expense.
Okay.
Part of the process.
Yeah, I'm thinking so, but no one can give me a definite answer as to who would I need to write to, what would I need to give to them. But it's still an ongoing process. So just wanted to get an idea. Thank you.
And the other question here is from Nikita as well. Am I responsible for repaying an unmarried sibling's debts?
Generally speaking, if you're not part of the debt, if it's, if you're not sharing the debt, or you're not on the same, you're not, if it was a bank debt, you're not part of the same account, then the answer would be no, but it does vary in specific circumstances. I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't sound as though that would be a liability. The debts generally are debts of the estate and not of individuals. The only exception to that would be if it was a joint bank account and it was a joint loan, for example. So there are some situations where you can be liable for the bereaved debts, but mostly you wouldn't typically be just by being related, no.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that came up, someone in our community was renting with a friend, and the friend died, and they were both jointly on the contract, and the friend was liable for the rent for both of them because they're both on the contract, which is obviously incredibly difficult when you're living in a house, and suddenly I think they were fairly young and didn't have a massive income, suddenly responsible for both of the tenants' rent, and the landlord was not very nice about it, which is they're in their right to be, but you think from a kind of ethical perspective they would have a bit of compassion. So and I guess that's a joint obligation with someone, as an example of it. And just moving on to looking at budgeting a little, we're going to touch on this today, and then we're going to have another session if people are interested. Just looking at my questions, what's the best way to think about budgeting? We kind of touched on it earlier. How would you go about starting to think about managing your money overall?
Well, there are a few ways that you can do it. And I think basically you need a tool or an application or some sort of method for handling your budget. And that could be as simple as writing it down on a piece of paper. You could make a spreadsheet. There are some online budgeting. The Money Advice Service has an online budget that you can enter things under various headings. All the way up to, there are some applications you can buy, such as Mint, and you need a budget where they will give you a mobile app and they can take input from your bank account and from your credit cards. Obviously, you would need to give them permission to access that information. So if you were worried about the security of that, that may not be for you. So there's a whole series of different levels of complexity really, but the simplest way is to start with a piece of paper or a spreadsheet, and you start by identifying your regular income, your pension, your employment income, benefits, anything coming in, rental income for example, and then on the other side you have your outgoings, your expenses, and you would start with your regular household expenses, your regular utility bills, your rent or mortgage or whatever. Maybe pay life assurance, all the monthly bills, and then think about the more occasional bills. So you've got to think about the things that maybe you pay every 6 months, or your car running costs. So once a year, your car needs a service or an MOT, so you need to allow for that. And you build it up that way. To prepare to draw up a budget, it's normally best to have some bank statements to hand and some credit card statements to hand, so you can have a look and see what you've actually spent already. And more of the bank accounts have an automatic system that will analyze your spending, and they're actually quite good. I've tried a few of them, and they're quite accurate at picking up the spending and allocating it to the right category. They're quite smart. So there's lots of ways to do it, but the principle is always the same. You're working out what's coming in every month and then what's going out, and then remembering those big pieces of expenditure like maybe birthday presents and Christmas presents and all those sort of things on top. So in a really brief nutshell, that's kind of what's involved in drawing up a budget. But it takes a little while to do it, and you need to sort of then have a system in place to make sure that you're sticking to your budget. Otherwise it's wasted. So you need to review your balances and your finances every so often, and we recommend at the beginning people maybe do it every week. Sit down on a Sunday morning, have a look at what's coming in, what's going out. Did you were there any unexpected bills? Was there something you forgot was coming? Did you forget that, the window cleaner comes this month, you have to pay the window cleaner this week? All kinds of things. And then gradually over time, you get into the swing of it, and it starts to fall into place. But it is it's a discipline. I'm sorry, there's no magic answer here. So yeah, that's how it goes.
And I know that you said that you categorize spending into essential spending and non-essential spending, basically the fun stuff and the stuff you need to survive. And I know when I looked at my budget that you have to pay the survival things, and you realize, is there a normal ratio of kind of essential and non-essential that people have? And is there a spending amount that, like a saving amount that you recommend as well?
Okay, there's a couple of questions there. So yes, so essential spending is the things that keep the roof over your head, food, warmth, the essentials of life. And really, you should be able to work out a monthly amount of how much you need for those regular outgoings. And what's helpful for some people is maybe to have a separate bank account to pay those direct debits, those regular bills, so that they're covered. And then you can transfer that amount into your household account each month at the beginning of the month, and then all the direct debits come out and that's covered. That works quite well for some people, but it's not for everybody. The non-essential spending is the stuff that you don't need to buy right now. It's, it's the entertainment, it's the clothing, it's the stuff that could be put off. But eventually you might decide you do consciously want to spend some money on those things. And obviously clothes wear out, shoes wear out. You do have to replace some things at some point. So you need to have an allowance for those. But equally, if you're going to go mad this month and spend £100 on something, that's £100 you can't spend on anything else. You can only spend each pound once. And when it's gone, it's gone. That's it. So that's kind of how we think about it. And that's why keeping track of what's actually happening is important. So no one's saying you can't have a takeaway coffee here or an ice cream there or anything else. But if you do that every week, that's a £5 a week, or however much you spend on your coffee, that's a £5 a week you haven't got to spend on something else. So that's, that's the key thing to remember, really. You need to stay within that budget. Otherwise, every bit over that you're paying, you're going to have to repay in the future. That's future income you're spending. So, you'd rather have that for the fun things in the future rather than spending it all now. So it's all to do with the way you look at it. And just, I know it's very easy to spend money with contactless cards and it's painless and you just fly, your card or your phone, mobile payments. You don't even feel it when you spend it. It's, it's a painless way of spending money. And when the credit card comes in after Christmas, you look at that statement and suddenly you realize how much you spent. So this is why keeping track of it and planning it a little bit more is important. And I think that helps. The sort of pitfalls that I think people often overlook, it's the one-off things, the Christmas presents, the birthday presents. It's the stopping off at the local shop on the way home because I need some milk and, I bought some bread and I bought some biscuits and I bought some this and there was an offer on that. And suddenly you've bought a whole load of stuff. And if you do that a couple of times a week, your food budget's blown. Those are the kind of things that it's so easy for all of us to slip into. So, so that's why working through the bank statements, having a look each month, seeing what's come out, is it what you expected? And then you'll gradually train yourself to be aware of these things.
I think when, you, as we discussed before, you lose an income stream, it becomes suddenly even more important because it could be that those bits of spending that maybe you didn't notice before suddenly have a big impact. And doing a budget plan at this point, if you've had a loss, it's a good moment to kind of take stock and understand, like, does your lifestyle have to change a little bit, or do you need to change jobs or go back into work as well? So although we're kind of joking about the fun stuff, there's also potentially a big implication if you have had a big change. I'm wondering if anyone has any questions. I've got quite a few more, so we can carry on, but feel free to chip in if you do. So a question that's come up is that, can fees paid to a solicitor for the purpose of dealing with the late person's bank affairs be reimbursed? So this has come up before, but I think maybe touch on it again. And if so, how can you reimburse the solicitor's fees?
Goodness me, I don't know that I can answer that. That's a bit too specific for me. I'm sorry, I'm not a legal person. And I think that sounds as though that would depend on the particular situation.
Sure. From kind of untangling our other work, I think in general you can claim a lot back from the estate, but I'll go away and check that with our solicitors, and I'll send a follow-up message after this event to tell everyone whether you can notify, you can reimburse those fees, and if so, how you do it. Another question is, if you need to access your loved one's money after they die, how can you do this? Can you do this straight away?
It depends how everything is set up. I mean, I think what we would generally recommend, and you don't need to be a couple in order to do this, but if you think there could be an issue, then being put on the bank account as another signature is a really good idea, because then there's no interruption. After the bereavement, you continue to have access to the bank account, and you may choose to do that with an elderly parent, for example. I've just done power of attorney with my mum, so she didn't even have to go to the bank. I took the power of attorney to the bank, took my own ID, and they're going to add me to the bank account now. So I don't feel as though I need it right now, but it's comforting to know it's there if, you know, if things needed to be organised on her behalf. So a bit of forward thinking can help there. So powers of attorney, adding a third party authority are ways of doing it ahead of time. And either of those are a good way of doing it. Afterwards, you're really dependent on the bank then. The bank would normally release the money to the executor, and that's assuming there's a will and named executors, so that would be part of the probate process. So there may be a wait for that to kick in and to happen. If there is no will, then it's down to whether someone steps in to administer the estate. No one can force you to do it, so it may be there is no one to administer the estate, and if the estate was in debt or negative, that might be a wise move, you know, not to take it on. If there wasn't sufficient money in the estate to pay the debts, you probably wouldn't want to be in that situation. So it varies according to the situation. I think the bottom line is, if you think there could be an issue in the future, it's a bit like making a will. Doing a power of attorney at the same time is a good idea for all of us, whatever age we are. So so I certainly have powers of attorney. My mum and dad set them up, and I feel it's a good insurance policy that's there if we need it. Hopefully we'll never need it, but it's there if we do.
Yeah. So in terms of power of attorney, it's a great thing to do as forward planning. Nominate a power of attorney that can take over your account. If you've had a bereavement and you're not in that position, it's obviously a lot harder. And accessing, as we said before, you could probably get away with accessing their bank account a tiny bit, but then you've got to notify the banks. And once you notify the banks, the accounts freeze, and then you can't take any money out. But once you've gone through probate, and you can then get the money out of the account. So it's a good thing to note. Just one last question before we wrap up, which is, oh no, it's the same question. A bit more clarification around if you were talking about earlier about being able to reimburse things like the costs of being executor. Could you just kind of expand on that a little bit more if someone's asking more information about that?
Yes, certainly. So in my experience of being an executor, I had quite a lot of costs of postage, of sending documents off, receiving documents, sending death certificates, getting them back. There is a cost of obtaining death certificates. The companies in the UK tend to take a copy and return them. So you may want to get a few so that you've got a few on the go at the same time, but you will generally get them back and you can reuse them. But if you want to get extra ones, there's a cost associated with that. So as an executor, if you paid for extra death certificates, I think that would come out of the estate, as would the postage, the registered postage. I claimed all of that. I claimed the probate fee, as I said. I think anything directly associated, any direct cost where you've got a receipt for I've paid this out, I don't think there would be any problem with that. I understand you're not allowed to claim for your time, even if you were a professional executor who did that as a paid job. I don't think when you're doing it in this situation that you can charge for your time at all. I think that's completely not permitted.
And
so
who,
I think
who are you reimbursing from? Who's that? Is that from the estate? How do you actually do that?
Yes, that's from the estate. I mean, as executor, you can, if you have control over the money, you can pay yourself, but you've obviously got to account for everything you do as an executor. And it would be normal to have a separate executor's account, or at least a separate bank account. And you've got to say what all the payments are. And I think it would be best practice to give the beneficiaries a copy of that account at the end to show that everything had been done correctly.
So basically, you keep your receipts of everything that you're spending on, and then at the end, you can take the money out of the estate, so out of any bank accounts in the estate, to reimburse yourself before you then distribute the estate to beneficiaries. Great. Thank you so much.
There is some guidance around of what you can and can't claim. There probably are some specific examples where it can be difficult. I can see there's another comment. My mum's bank said I had to open an estate account. Well, I was told this as well during lockdown, and it wasn't possible to go to the bank to open an executor's account face to face. And so the bank offered me just a normal separate bank account, which I did. And I don't think there is any legal requirement to have an executor's account. I think any separate bank account will do, because I think the issue is so I was handling my parents-in-law, and if I'd paid it into my own bank account and then something had happened to me, how would anybody else know what was theirs and what was mine? They'd have a real tough time sorting it out. So just having it in a separate account, I think is generally sufficient from what I understood, and that's certainly what I did. And then I closed that all down at the end after I distributed all the money, and that was it. It was all done.
So setting up a separate account, and there's quite a lot of digital online accounts like Monzo and Revolut and Starling that you can set up the whole account through your phone. So it might be good to use one of those where you don't have to go in anywhere.
Well, I did a Halifax one online, if I'm allowed to say that. And the beauty of that was also I could photograph checks and they were paid in. I didn't have to go to the bank for that either, because some organisations will send you checks made out to the executor of, and you need to get those into a bank account somehow. So that's why you need a separate account. That's probably why the bank was asking for one. So what, you take a photo and upload the check, or? Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I've not heard that.
It's amazing. It was the first time I'd done that, so I was very impressed with that. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very impressed. I'm impressed Halifax has done that. So I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat. So here's the money advice service that Liz has mentioned that has guide of kind of what you need to do, and also has some of those calculators. And then we've got an article here about how to notify banks and using the death notification service in the UK. And finally, I'm also going to put a survey here. If anyone would love to fill that out afterwards and give us your feedback on the event, that would be fantastic. I will also send round an email with those links. I'll chat to the lawyer and find out about reimbursing the lawyer's fees out of the estate as well. And I'll come back to you on that. But thank you so much, Liz, firstly, for a really, really informative event. It was really helpful. And I think it was great that you kind of answered so many questions and gave us really a very big whistle-stop tour of the things to think about. And I know it's such a stressful time. So having that guidance and talking it through is so much easier actually than scrolling through the internet with reels and reels of information. So thank you. And thanks everyone for coming today. We're running a series of events all around grief and wellness. So join Untangle today, and you'll see there's lots more events. I've just put the link in there. They're all for free around lots of different aspects of grief and wellness. So we're looking at doing a writing workshop, we're looking at sleep, nutrition, wellness. So yes, come along. And we also have lots of step-by-step guides on our website and on-hand experts to help you close accounts and speak to lawyers. Go chat to one of our lawyers and come back to you all. So thanks everyone, and we'll send you an email with that survey feedback and any more thoughts. And the most important thing, which I almost forgot to mention, was Liz and Untangle are going to be running a personal budgeting workshop. So that will be a more in-depth session where we'll actually use one of these budget plans, sit down and take you through it bit by bit. And so we'll be sending information about that as well afterwards. And as if everyone's interested, then we will set up a time for that. So thank you, Liz, and thanks everyone for coming. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.